These are so cool. I'm so excited to share. This is gonna be great. Yay, yay, yay. We're gonna need a hammer today. I'm always excited when we need unusual things. Oh, I haven't turned the iron on. Hold on one sec. Oh, you know what else we're gonna use today? You're gonna love this. It's an anvil.
Roll it.
Okay, we're rolling. Where did I put? I just want to show you this other thing. This is something we call a jean tack. It's the metal buttons that go down the front of your jeans. Why am I showing you this? Because this is useless now. I have people bring these in all the time because they're like, oh, all I need you to do is put this back in this hole that it ripped out of. And you know what? I'm sorry, but it's done now. Once you hammer these in, that's it, single use. But the good news is we can get more, and we're going to put them in today. So that brings me to this little hole right here, because today we're gonna learn how to install a jean tack. So getting started with our little jean tack or jean button replacement, this is gonna be a two-parter. The first part is that we have to actually repair the hole that it made when it ripped out. Then, once this is stitched over and strong again, we'll be able to put a new jean tack in its place, and we'll be back in business. So, when we repair a hole like this, specifically in denim, but it can apply to any fabric, this is what I'm gonna call this type of patching that I'm gonna show you, darning. D-A-R-N-I-N-G, darning. You've heard this term used probably in reference to socks, literally something I would never do anymore, but when we used to hand knit socks, it would make sense to darn the holes. Now, however, not so much the case. However, we still use this same process to patch up holes, especially in denim. So to start, we're gonna take our jeans over to our thread wall and pick out a couple of different thread colors that might work. We're looking for something that's gonna match. However, obviously you can see in the twill weave of this denim, there's a couple of different colors. So we may be able to find a good match, but we may need to pick two different ones and switch our thread halfway through to kind of give this twill weave sort of impression. So we'll find out what we've got over here. That one could work, but it's a little light. I bet you can tell from there. How about right above it? That one's not bad, but a little dark and a little warm. So we're looking for something in between there, but cooler, a little too gray. This is actually how efficient this process is. So if you're wondering, we do this every single time. Oh, that is a perfect match. Hopefully you can't even tell where the thread is coming out there. Good sign. All right, we're gonna take this bad boy over and get threaded up in the machine. Now, depending on how big your hole is, you're gonna make a decision right now before we start stitching. Are you going to patch it with some fusible interfacing? Now, I've got a little video on fusible, I think already, but to sum it up, it just means that it's got little beads of glue on it, and when you press the iron on it from the backside, it fuses itself to the fabric to give it a little bit of stability. So that's why we call it interfacing. It's really bolstering the strength of that fabric. In this case, because it's in a high tension area, this tack, that's a bobbin, this tack is right here on the button fly. So it's gonna get a lot of play. That area, especially when we're sitting, is gonna get a lot of movement. So we're gonna try a little bit of fusible and some stitching on top, and I think that's gonna be the key for us there. I'm gonna set this surface that I'm working on up above so that I'm not pressing the rest of the pants underneath of it. The reason is because I want the heat from the iron to be reflected directly back up without traveling through other layers of fabric. And that's because we're gonna put a fair amount of heat on this thing. Any type of fusible, the glue is really gonna need good, strong heat to be able to fuse and then last the washing that this is going to do, because we all heavily wash our jeans. They are one of the most loved things in our closets. So I've got a little bit of a chunk there. I'm going to do this from the inside, and these little metal tacks on either side, they're probably going to kind of get in my way. So I'm going to be trying to use the little nose of my iron to get that heat right where I want it. And I'm only going to use a piece that's big enough to cover that. So I'm going to trim that down. Great. And then I'm going to try to make it look square just so that I look like a professional. And then I'm going to do one last thing. Though the glue that I can feel on here is usually pretty strong, I am just like skeptical as a person. And so I sandwich a little bit of stitch witchery, which is straight up glue. So right there, Fusible bonding web. Ugh, one of my very favorite things in the whole world. Do you see how you can see through it where it really is like a spider web? This is full-blown glue. This up here is a shorter version of what I just cut, a little smaller width, but it's only got glue on one side. The other side is smooth. When you're using Fusible, pure Fusible, you have to have 2 layers in between it. You can't just put the iron on this. It'll just get stuck to the iron. Yuck. So I'm going to put that down first. I'm going to trim a teensy bit of these frayed edges. Just a little bit. Not entirely, because I'm actually going to use some of those edges to push in and make it look like it's still kind of whole. And then I'm going to put my Fusible webbing right there on top of it. And finally, I'm going to put my interfacing on top of that in a slightly larger square. Look at that adorable little sandwich. Okay, now, ooh, can you see that? I just placed the iron right there on that corner. Do you see how that is already pressed down? I haven't even put steam on it yet. Now, I am going to hold it in one place, but do be careful, because normally I like to move it. However, the glue isn't crazy about that. So in this case, we are directing a fair amount of heat straight down into that one spot, but the denim is okay with that. Not all fabrics are, but denim is. Okay. I'm going to let that cool here in that spot, but as long as it's hard for me to get the edges to peel up, I think we're good. I'm going to hit it one more from this side. Oh, and any edges that are frayed, that didn't get caught in that glued section, I'm going to trim those off. And then I'm going to hit it one more time from the side. That looks awesome. Okay. Now for the crazy part. We fused, and now we're ready to sew. Let's head back over to the machine. That doesn't matter. I'm going to grab out, I wouldn't call this a zipper foot. I would call this a narrow foot. This is my regular foot here, nice spread to give you a good feed. This little guy, admittedly, the feed is more difficult to control. However, in this particular situation, I am going to be sewing along this stitched edge, and I think I might need that. We're going to find out. I'm going to start with this guy, and then I may switch halfway through. But we'll see. This is always kind of a trial and error process. Essentially, what we're going to do right here is in very lovely little uniform rows of very small stitching, we're going to run over that hole, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So, this is where I warn you. This is a commitment. You will never, ever, ever be able to take out the stitching. Not just because we're using a small stitch length, but also because you are running over a weak part of fabric anyway, and literally the idea is that we're using this tight stitching in matching color thread to beat the hole into submission and not be able to know where the hole begins and the rest of the fabric ends. That's the idea. So it may be a good idea to test this out on another piece of denim first that's similar, because ain't no going back. This is it. We're here and doing it, and whatever it looks like is what it's going to look like forever. So on that friendly thought, let's get to business. We're going to start, let's say less than 1/4 inch above where the hole begins, so maybe like 1/8 of an inch. And then we're just going to start. So I'm going to go forward, and then I'm going to go backward. And I am gently, very gently, using my left hand to pull the fabric this direction, fighting against the feed dogs underneath, to run a very, very slightly large zigzagged stitch. So before I can actually make it even look good, I'm going to pull this out and show you what it looks like. You could stop right there, okay? I don't like it like that, but you could. That is relatively okay. However, I like to just like go whole hog and just keep going. Like I said, beating it into submission is really the only way to describe my plans for this. Well, did you see that jump? Every time that the edge of the presser foot falls off of this ledge right here, that it jumps a little. So this section of white, that's going to be a little bit tricky for me. This is when I'll probably have to switch over to this little guy. Now, I'd like to take a quick break and jump over to our whiteboard so that I can draw you what I am doing here. Okay, so what am I actually doing? Good news, bad news. The good news is hopefully it's hard for you to see in the video my stitching lines, because that means that we chose a good color thread. The bad news is if you've never done this before, you can't tell what I'm doing. So what I'm actually doing is putting stitching lines in that look like this. They're really, really, really close. And if possible, if the hole is kind of uniform, actually let's draw that hole in pink. If the hole is kind of uniform like this, it's easy to choose a spot to go over like that. And then you just keep getting closer and closer and closer until you can't find it anymore. That's great. Now, if you have like a weird hole, like, oh, I tore it there, but then it's really big there, that's when it gets kind of weird, okay, admittedly. And you got to figure out how you want this to look. But again, the secret is it's never going to look like it did before. And with denim, I think that's okay. Stylistically, functionally, it doesn't matter. It's fine. Definitely repair your denim. Definitely repair your jeans. It's just that from the onset, good to know, it's never going to look like it did before, and that's fine. So just do the best that you can covering that hole however you need to. And it doesn't need to be uniform. We're trying to make the stitching uniform just so that we can give it that melted in look like it never happened. That being said, let's switch to that little narrow foot and see what we can do. So meet me over there. I can do this. I'm good at things. All right, I am using my big fat screwdriver. It's my favorite one to jam into this screw that admittedly is getting a little stripped and I need to go buy a new one. And I'm gonna pull that baby off and put that baby on. This is actually a great opportunity for you to check out my feed dog situation, which is these guys down here. Those teeth or feed dogs down below, that's what's fighting against you when you're trying to move the fabric yourself. Now, there are definitely home machines that allow you to lower those below the throat plate, and then you can move, like if you have an embroidery machine or a quilting machine, that bad boy is gonna allow you to lower those with like a switch so that you have full range, and then you are golden. It's just that in these industrials, I don't have that option. So we're just manually fighting it on purpose. Alrighty, back to business. You see how that's gonna, ooh, that is gonna be good. It is. And I need both hands and my finger up here on the reverse to get all of this going. So it's really a matter of true multitasking that's going to get you that great uniform stitching here. And I'm going to come back to the start a lot. We'll cut our little tails off later. But as you can see, that white shredded area of the hole is getting harder and harder to see, which is our goal. Now, you can overdo it with this. So what I want you to do after you've done a few runs is stop and pull it out and feel it. I want you to feel it with your fingers and say, okay, how much stiffer is this than the fabric around it? Because if you go too hard and you put too much stitching in there and it's super, super stiff like a board, that will also cause it to weaken and tear around the edges of your stitching. So we are just about ready to punch in our new tack. We're gonna be pretty good with this. I know it was a little hard for me to get close to the edge there, but I will say that when we put a new tack in there, not this one, it's gonna cover it. So I think we're pretty well good. The last thing that you're gonna look at is the back. That's also gonna give you a good indication because a lot of this interfacing does come in white. So there's a really good chance you too will be using white and you'll be able to see how much stitching you've put in there, which is quite a bit. So I think that I'm really happy with that. I'm just gonna cut a couple of my tails here, and then we're ready to go revisit our baby anvil and hammer and our new tack on the table. So let's go. Part 2. This is the fun part too. So let's talk about terminology. This is not called a button. I probably will still call it that in the title of this video because nobody knows what it's called. But these metal jean buttons are called tacks, T-A-C-K. And I think it's probably having to do with how they're constructed. So let's talk about that next. This is a 2-part deal. I'm going to show you a pretty one. You've got this decorative head, and then you've got the little post that it gets hammered onto. Once this goes into here, then this will kind of crush and expand around that post, and then they're just welded together forever. It's like a match made in sewing heaven. So that is what we're gonna do now. All we have to do is pick one that looks awesome. You can get these anywhere. You can get them on Amazon, Wawak, whatever. I'll link it. But this is just a variety of ones that I have right now. A cutie copper, some shiny ones, a little matte one. This is the one that we pulled off. It is a little bit smaller than what I've got available. So I'm gonna choose my matte colored one because I like it. And I'm gonna come up to the fly here and make sure that this guy will fit through the hole that it's supposed to go through when it's repaired, just so that we are good before we hammer that guy in. These are hard to remove. We're gonna make sure that this one will fit through the hole that's already there because these are pretty hard to take out once they're installed. So I'm just gonna make sure that this little guy can slide through, and that's what it's gonna look like when it's done. Very cute. Okay, let's get this flap out of the way. I'm gonna take one of my safety pins and go like this. And then this little buddy that my dear sweet friend gave me, thinking that I would put it back in, is just trash now. You don't have to tell them that, but it is. It just doesn't work that way. Like these they don't come apart. Even if they do come apart, they're not useful anymore. We're about to crush these together. That's it. And once they're done, they're done. So, no pressure, but it needs to be perfect. So we're gonna take our little post here, and we're gonna come to the back side of the fabric and try to just jam that pointed edge straight through manually. And they do make that pointed on purpose, specifically for this reason. After I've done that, I'm gonna look at my spacing. Now, you can measure this like a professional, or you can just eyeball it like a real professional. And I see that I think I like that spacing. I think that's good. I also feel that aside from the hole that I've just made, I feel the strength of the stitching and the fabric around it, and I'm content with that. I'm happy with that. I feel when I move the fabric around that that is gonna hold. Now, I'm gonna place the decorative side right on top. It doesn't click in or anything like that. It's just resting there until we smack it. Now, I'm gonna put my little anvil underneath of here, just like that. This tabletop is really not meant for hammering. I'm gonna assume that your kitchen table or wherever you're doing this is also not meant for hammering. So that's what the anvil is for. I will tell you though, again, excessive little purchase. You don't need to purchase this. I just like it. I like how it sounds. I like how it looks. I like that I feel like a tiny little forger, you know, like maybe I'll make a tiny sword later. Okay, the one last thing to know before we make this big hit is if you've got a decorative surface, put a piece of cloth over it. It just makes it a little bit harder to aim. So sometimes I'll flip this, but even then I don't know how well it will protect it. But if you wanted to put the flat side, the decorative side, down on the anvil instead and hit it from the back, you could do that. You know what? Let's do it that way. Let's see how that turns out. So I'm gonna flip this. I'm holding my post in place, placing my anvil and my little decorative cutie, and then I am sliding the post down into that. Remember, it doesn't hold itself in place. You have to hold it in place. So I am holding that with my finger right there. Okay, everything is set. Now, just kidding. That would be ridiculous. Don't do that. There's definitely a technique here, but I don't know what it is. So I'm just gonna smash it. I'll like do this kind of wind up deal like, oh, I'm aiming and this is definitely gonna go well. But if you think that I don't miss it minimum 50% of the time, then you haven't been paying attention to these videos in general. Okay, 1, 2. Oh, I'm always afraid that I'm gonna miss it. Okay, I'm ready for this. I'm ready for this. Maybe if I get my face closer to it, it'll make it more likely. Yeah, that'll work too. Okay, we're just gonna give it a small tap to get started. Okay, that definitely worked. It's holding it on, but it's not good enough. We gotta like hit it way harder than that. Yeah, that was much better. Yeah. Ooh, and look at that. Okay, putting the face down was more protective. I really like that. Barely scratched at all. Ooh, this is good. Now, the only way to test it is to yank it around. Strong. It's strong. I love it. I'm gonna button these up just to test it out. But boy, I think, as usual, the actual replacing of the jean tack was the easiest part. All of the prep and materials and getting there is really the more difficult part. But once you've done it once and you buy these materials, just these, you've got a hammer, someone has a hammer. And finding these, which I will link, not that hard. Once you've got them, you're good. You can replace these for the rest of the life of these beautiful little jeans. Look at that! And with this flap, you know, you don't even notice that they're not the same. The function is what matters here. We're just trying to get a good close color, and then we're trying to get that function back so that we can wear them again. Okay. All right. I'm still trying to prove that it was an important and useful purchase. So we're gonna showcase it while I say questions, concerns, comments. I think there will be some because there were a lot of tools. Well, a fair amount of heavy tools. So ask me things about this. You know, like, subscribe, do all the things. Thank you so much. See you soon.